I heard footsteps in the night and woke up. The roof above my bedroom moved in slow, steady steps. I rolled over on my side and stretched my ears through the darkness, hoping that the sounds were just part of a dream that was ending. Still, they were there again, clear in the early morning quiet. With my heart racing, I looked around the room for a logical reason. My wife Helen slept soundly next to me and wasn't bothered. Downstairs, our kids were safe. My family and I lived alone in this remote country home, miles away from any other people. I crept out from under the covers, slid onto the landing, and peered up the stairs. Through the window, a pale moonlight came in, just bright enough to see the empty landing. I held my breath and listened more carefully. The footsteps were no longer there. Were there mice in the attic, or did the old house settle as the temperature dropped? I tried to persuade myself that things that seemed supernatural had rational reasons. It was possible for being alone out here to play tricks on my mind. Still, a deep-seated sense told me I wasn't dreaming. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer with shaky hands and started the climb up. Each step made a noise like it was letting people know I was coming. At the very top, the attic hatch was still closed from when I left it. I pulled the cord tighter and swung the wooden panel inward, shining my light into the huge room beyond. Dust motes moved around freely in the beam. There were dust, boxes, and old furniture, but no one had messed with the mess. Just things that remind me of the 10 years I lived here with my young family. As reason took over fear, my heart rate started to slow down. Why did I think the worst when I was by myself in the middle of the night? In these conditions, anyone would feel on edge. I laughed to myself and turned to go back too. I heard it then. I heard a floorboard creak right behind me. It was so close that I think its breath could have made the hairs on my neck stand up. As I slowly turned, my blood froze and the flashlight shook as I thought about what might be hiding in the darkness. But like before, all I saw were dust sheets and ceilings. "Who's there?" I asked, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "Keep quiet." As I quickly backed up to the hatch while shaking my head, I squished past boxes. Something had to make sense. From the darkness came a voice that was so soft it was almost invisible. Who indeed? I slammed the door shut and ran down the stairs. I didn't dare look back until I was back in my bedroom and safe. As the sun came up, I held the flashlight like a weapon, eager for the light to chase away the darkness of the long night. Someone or something was in my house. I wasn't the only one. When I woke up the next morning, I hoped that the light of dawn would make the nightmares of the night before seem like nothing more than a bad dream. But even as I dressed my family and fed them, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease in my gut. Even though I tried to ignore it and get my work done, I couldn't help but notice shadowy figures going up and down stairs and around curves. I got tense every time the old house creaked. I was shocked by everyday sounds because I thought threats were whispered behind them. Helen noticed how jumpy I was, but I tried not to show it because I didn't want to scare her. It was very important that she didn't think I was losing it. When she got home that afternoon, I was standing by the front window, looking out at the long road and into the woods for any sign of movement. The kids were already asleep. She came up behind me and put her arms around my waist. "What's making you so jumpy, dear?" I didn't care about her worry. Just tired, I guess. Didn't sleep well. Another nightmare. Her warm breath tickled my ear, taking me back to a time when things were easier and safer, before the voice in the attic, before our house no longer felt like a safe place to be. I felt uneasy when I learned that voice knew personal things about me. It brought up the worst parts of my life and made me feel bad about things I had buried deep. It didn't feel private anywhere if someone could look through my deepest fears and use them as tools. I wasn't brave enough to tell Helen about these scary realizations yet, because I didn't want to scare her for no reason. But what really bothered me was how true the voice's taunts were and what they meant. Things that only I knew, or could it see into my mind and pull nightmares right from my mind. I was scared of what might happen. That night, I checked and double-checked the locks several times before admitting that there were no defenses against a threat that seemed to appear out of nowhere. When it got dark, my family went to their rooms, and I stayed at the top of the stairs with a heavy iron stick. The house felt like it was smothering in the darkness. I strained my ears to find anything strange among the normal sounds of the house, then just barely louder than my heart beating fast. "Why so jumpy, dear?" When I heard that voice, I felt my blood start to boil, because it was so familiar and mocking. It had come back, and this time, by using my wife's loving term of endearment, it proved its evil plans went beyond just scaring me. It also had its sights set on my family. I yelled into the void, "Show yourself," while holding up the poker like a charm. I was met with thick, cloying silence. Up until, as you wish. When I turned to look for the cause, all I saw was blackness. Then I saw a shape flickering in the corner of my eye. It was low to the ground and crawling on all fours, like a horrible bug. As I followed it with my flashlight, I caught glimpses of its greasy skin and two long arms. It looked like it was going around bends ahead of the beam, distorting just enough that it was impossible to see. "What do you want from me?" I asked, but my voice was shaking with fear. A creepy, familiar laugh came from nowhere and everywhere. "You, dear friend." The real game started then. Small things around the house would roll or tap on their own, as if they were being moved by hands that couldn't be seen. From behind closed doors, whispers came out that were too faint to make out words, but were full of looming danger. I rushed from room to room but couldn't find anything. The strange things were following me everywhere I went, never stopping. Around Tomb, a scream that made your blood boil rang through the house. "Hi, Helen." I ran into our bedroom out of breath, but found her curled up on her side with her hair spread out across the pillow, soundly asleep, as if no one had woken her. When I turned around, I heard a voice whispering from behind me. "Why are you so worried, dear? It's only a dream." When I turned around with my poker raised, I saw nothing but empty space. As I went back to the hall, I saw flickering movement coming down the hall from the kids' room. When I rushed over and opened the door, I saw that the room was bathed in a scary blue glow. It was the nightlight, which was moving hypnotically from side to side, as if it were being pushed by a hidden playmate. I turned very slowly. A message for me was written on the background in what looked like blood, which was very scary. "I know all of your secrets." I screamed and swung the poker around aimlessly as my mind fell apart. This invader wasn't harmless. It was a demon that was breaking down my mental health one piece at a time by breaking into my home and violating my most private rights. It had only just started. I didn't take any chances the next night. After making the house as secure as a safe, I set up a whole network of defenses, including motion sensors, cameras, and baby monitors, to keep an eye on everything that was going on around the property. This time, if this thing tried to get into my house, I'd be ready. At midnight, I turned on the network and sat there watching several bright screens that showed each room in a grainy night vision way. At first, everything was too still. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for the darkness to show what horrible things it might hide. It had been an hour with no problems. Had my safety measures finally kept them away? My tired nerves started to relax, and my guard went down, when a flashing light caught my attention on one monitor, the basement, the lights moving around as if they were being swayed by drafts from below. I zipped in, trying hard to see through the noise. Was that a shape hunched over by the stairs? The long limbs folded inward like a spider's, and the head twitched as if it were tasting the air. I stopped moving when I saw an invasion that shouldn't have been possible. Before I could say anything, it disappeared into the darkness just as quickly as it had appeared. I looked at it from different angles and saw nothing strange. It was like the ghost had just been a trick of the static filled feed. Just as doubt began to set in, a horrifying scream came from the baby monitor. "Hannah, waking up from a bad dream. I ran 3 at a time upstairs, sliding around the corner, but Hannah's door was still shut, and there was no noise coming from inside. Coming to a stop, I felt a mix of confusion and fear. After that, it hit like a baseball bat. This didn't really put my family in danger. It was tricking me with lies and making it harder for me to tell the difference between reality and its scary lies. I had to separate myself from it and deny it the pleasure of fully freeing me. I went back downstairs with shaking hands and looked at the camera feeds for a long time. The house was as quiet and normal as it ever is in the dark early hours. And no one else showed up. Had I imagined even that brief look in the basement, my mind was falling apart because of doubt. The thing must have felt my grip getting weak. My daughter's cries and giggles like a child started coming from the baby monitor. She was asking for help. I threw it away and put my hands over my ears. The sounds kept going on in my head though, because I was going crazy. I shut off all the screens and sounds out of desperation and hid under a pile of blankets in my bedroom like a child. I couldn't fall asleep because ghostly sounds kept resonating through the house and fooling my tired senses. It was dawn before I could stand up straight again. I stayed where I was because I was afraid to go outside and see what new blasphemies had appeared overnight. My wife and kids didn't come close. They looked at me with worry, mixed with fear, seeing how crazy I looked with my droopy eyes. That night, my stress had built up to a dull throb below my head. So when the sound of sobs rang out again in the dark, I was ready. When I turned on the monitor, I saw Helen, not my daughter, moving around in her tangled sheets and pleading with me to save her. Helen took a safe nap downstairs, so it's not possible. Still, the illusion looked so real that it was painful to see her fake pain. That's when I realized something. This game had changed, and its goal was to break my mind by attacking my reason. I had to use fire to fight fire. With tense nerves, I let the audio play out its horrible scenario, not believing any of the fears it tried to bring up. The being could tell I was fighting it, so it raised the stakes again by making sounds like my kids pleading in pain from their room. I decided not to take the bait and walked quietly to their closed door to listen. Everything inside stayed still. There was no harm done to my family because the ghost knew that touching them would make its tricks useless. As its anger grew, I called it bluff and met it with my own iron will. When the thing realized that its tricks weren't working to get my attention, it turned its attention to more direct strikes. Things flew through the rooms like rockets and hit the walls with a thumping sound. As I slept, claws seemed to tear through the skin on my back. When I woke up, all I could see were shadows. Still, I didn't let it take over my fear. This made the presence even angrier, and it started acting more and more aggressively, like a poltergeist. It tore up books, threw dishes, and turned furniture into kindling. But its invisible grip could never reach my thoughts. One night, everything was very quiet. The house was filled with a creepy silence that was worse than any storm. I knew that this quiet was the end of its plan to break me down over the course of weeks. Holding a crucifix in my hand, I began checking each room in a planned way, using my flashlight to cut through the thick darkness. I stopped in my tracks halfway up the stairs and took a deep breath. Between the moving spider webs, there was a path of shiny ichor that led up into the darkness. As I crept higher, I saw a message written in the cursed fluid. It made me feel both curious and scared. Find me. I bit my tongue and took the bait. This was going to end tonight, no matter what. The slime snaked along the hallway and always led to the feared attic hatch, which looked like a doorway to the abyss. I took a deep breath to calm myself and then threw it open, pulling myself into the empty space inside. My flashlight looked through the small area and only found dust and things that weren't being used. Thick dust hung there, unmoved, with no signs of recent entry. Then I saw it, a ragged, torn teddy bear dangling hypnotically from a rafter by a fraying paw. as if it had just been handled by clawed fingers. Damn you! Come out and look at me. Even though my heart was beating fast, my voice stayed calm. This scary thing would not make me scared again. From behind the boxes, heavy footsteps could be heard. As the dark, hulking shape lurched into the beam, it looked like an oversized fetus because it was shiny and hairless. Fingers ended in claws that scratched the floor. Its heads looked like those of humans, but they were twisted, with hollow sockets for the eyes and jaws that were too big for their bodies. I told them, "You've made a terrible mistake by breaking into my house. Do not come back, or you will have to deal with the results." Somewhere deep in its throat, a rough laugh came out. "You think you can beat me, little man? I was born from people's worst fears and turned into a monster. I can't be stopped. Good job. Then you don't let me choose." I jumped to the side and kicked over a stack of unstable boxes to get to the thing. It flailed to get away from the avalanche, which gave me precious seconds to get through the hatch and slam it shut behind me. I blocked the portal with every lock and chain I could find and dragged an old table in front of it to keep whatever evil anger was inside from getting through. As I ran downstairs, I threw open the front door to let in some fresh air. The angry howls and pounding shook the ceiling and the ground, but the entity stayed in its prison. When I used the beast's pride against it, I beat it at its own games for the first time in weeks, and I cracked a sad smile. It could no longer terrorize this house as it pleased. Over the next few nights, my family's sleep was not disrupted by any signs or sounds of the creature, no matter what it was. A demonic child of the underworld, for example. This house seemed like it could no longer hold its strange shape. Over time, not even its sounds were remembered. I might never know if they are really defeated or just waiting for someone else to let down their guard. But I will stay alert because any nightmares that try to hurt harmless people will find in me an enemy that is hard to beat. This is what I swore on the quiet graves of all the people that the entity had probably driven crazy in the years before we met. It's enough for me that my family is safe,